I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Cassandra Freeman, who plays Aunt Viv in Bel-Air, the new reimagining of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I want to just start there with, what was your initial thoughts when you heard that there was going to be a new version of that show, and just what your relationship was to Fresh Prince before you even signed on?
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, we'll do it in order. I mean, I grew up watching The Fresh Prince. Of course, I'm a kid from that era. Like I'm always just like, who is my age who did not watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? I mean, that show basically made hip hop so mainstream, like overnight. And when I first heard that they were doing this reimagining, I thought it was a horrible idea. And I was like, that just sounds like a failed idea. And then maybe after 6 or 8 months, I finally saw the trailer that Morgan Cooper produced with his own money out in Kansas City. And I was like, oh, I guess I missed out on this because this looks like a brilliant idea. So when the opportunity came to audition, then I thought, well, no, but I'm not Aunt Viv. So that's a stupid idea. But thankfully, I have an amazing manager who was like, no, you could be great. So yeah, a lot of denial and then acceptance.
Oh, yeah. Well, I imagine following in the footsteps of, Janet Hubert and Daphne Maxwell Reid was a bit daunting, I would guess. But what were the elements of maybe their version of Aunt Viv that you wanted to incorporate into your performance? And then what did you feel like you could have the freedom to kind of like bring something new? Like, what was the balance there?
Right. Yeah, great question. I like to think that Janet Hubert and Daphne Maxwell equally sort of have an imprint on my brain. So that's one reason why I thought it was just too unrealistic to even audition for it, because there's such an idea of who those people are. But after having a meeting with Morgan Cooper and Rashid Newsom, the showrunner, they told me right off the bat, they said, listen, don't worry about those shoes. You're here to create your own shoes. So what would that look like? And that really freed me up. And the first thing that came to me was that, when you look at those women in a sitcom world, those characters are fully realized. They're not necessarily striving to become anyone. And in this new world, Vivian Banks is a woman who is still in the process of becoming. I feel like you see her at the beginning of the show. You can't tell what it is, but I think you can feel that she feels suppressed in some way. There's a part of her that's hiding, that she wants to come out, but she's actually doesn't have the strength yet to come out. So I really love the idea that I could play someone who had a heavy heart, but who really wanted to be this other idea of herself. And so that was exciting to me. And also what was exciting to me was just to play someone who's that affluent, but who's still very much rooted in her Philadelphia-ness. And I thought that was just, I love characters who have, the dark and the light, those are things that sort of get me excited.
Right. Well, actually, I think there is this kind of interesting parallel journey going on with her and with Will, where, she tells them about how she had to adjust to this new environment of Bel-Air because she also came from West Philly. And, how she doesn't think that she let it change her, but that she adapted, basically.
Mhm.
So I'm actually curious, how did you even envision those early days for her? Is that something you thought about?
Oh my God. Listen, I love that. That's a great question. No one has asked me that question. Oh my goodness. Thank you for asking something brand new. I think I always thought about her like who she was in college. And I imagined her like she was so bohemian, probably had like big natural hair. She was the one who wore like really interesting clothing where you're like, oh my gosh, like how did she put these clothes together? I felt like she was someone who was very much of the culture, actually very much of the culture of like whatever was urban during her time. Like this is a girl who grew up in like the 90s when she was probably in college. This is a woman who listened to Lauryn Hill, so she's that woman. And then I like to think the moment she met Uncle Phil probably seemed so fake to her. And I think that, he represented sort of safety. And I like to think that she was somebody, and she says this later on in the episodes about how she was an artist, but everywhere she went, she had to keep proving her education. She had to keep proving that she might have done this artwork herself. And then she had to actually even fight for exhibit space. So I just thought about, what did a bright light look like that in a world? And then it slowly get diminished. And she realized, maybe that dream is not for me. And so she goes on a different path. And I think a part of you changes. And I love that at the beginning of the series, you really see her not as herself, but as like a projected image of herself, which is Michelle Obama. She's like, what is like the classiest Black woman I can think of whose husband runs for office? Okay, Michelle Obama, I'm gonna put on those clothes. So I think she's an actress at the top of the season. And by the end of it, she starts to have radical truth with her husband, with her sister, with her daughters. And by the end, she gets to have a great unveiling.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, it does sound like you've thought a lot about just your character, not just from what is on the page, but just her history. And I'm also just curious, because of that, how much you felt like you were able to relate to her story, just of someone who's had to like adapt and who is also expressing herself as a creative person. Like, do you have like common DNA with her in some regard?
Yeah, I think anyone who feels like they're outside of mainstream automatically feels a resonance to this type of storyline. So obviously, off the bat, I'm a Black woman and I'm a woman, but I'm also an artist. And I think a lot of my life is, I'm a very expressive person. So who does a very expressive person have to be in a world where people actually are quite small and muted? And so I know for me, that's very painful. And there's always a crossroad in an artist's life, really anyone's life who's trying to pursue something that they think is bigger than anything around themselves. They have to make a choice to decide to either shrink and hold on to that pain, or to release it and face the pain that might face them when all their friends say that this is who they cannot be. And I think for me in my life, I'm lucky enough that when that happened, I just started to say, okay, I need to find friends who love the really big expressive part of me. And my entire life changed, right to my representation. I remember at one point I got rid of everyone, my agent, my manager, my publicist. And I said, I just want a team who sees me the way I see the best of myself. And the thing is, when you find people like that, it's not even about like, will you get that award? Will you get that house, that life? It's more about, can you be around people who are up to big dreams like you? And even if you don't get it, the journey is so much more freeing and fun. And so absolutely, I felt that same feeling with Vivian Banks for sure. It was very personal. The most personal episode to me is when a couple comes in and they remember her as this woman who did a mural on the side of a school. And her husband says, oh yeah, she used to be an artist. And that hit me so deeply, because once an artist is always an artist. And that day on set, it was very emotional. And it's interesting to see how they edited it, but I would hope that the audience felt that same sort of, you can't take away something that she is. She is that. She is art.
Yeah, it's like those three little words. It's too much.
Much.
But obviously a big part of this, her story is just her relationship with Phil. Just curious what you did with Adrian Holmes ahead of time, maybe, to give that sense of a real relationship that feels pretty lived in by the time we even meet them in the first episode.
Thanks for saying that. The process of getting this role was so fast and furious. I was actually in Greece when it was offered to me. So by the time I got to California, we were running. But I'm so lucky because I've worked with Adrian Holmes in two other projects. We did a movie years ago with Lifetime called The Real MVP, where I portrayed Wanda Durant, Kevin Durant's mother, when he cried about she's the real MVP. And then I did actually a pilot with him a few months before Bel-Air, that was from Malcolm D. Lee, called At That Age, that didn't get picked up. But between all of those years, that's probably been like 6 or 7 years, we always remained friends. So I know Adrian very well. I know his wife really well. So to see that he was the one to get it, well, our chemistry was just there. We already had a friendship. And I think a married couple that's been together for over 20 years would have sort of that same feeling of friendship. And then we're just lucky enough to have chemistry on camera too.
Definitely. I also want to ask about Jabari Banks, who this is his first on-screen role, which still blows my mind, playing Will. You know, how is it to work with him, especially someone so new to the business that's also being asked to carry this show? Like, how does that feel on set?
You know, I have great respect for young artists because they're not jaded. And not only that, their hearts are so wide open. And to act with Jabari is so much fun. Really, all the young people in the show, this is true. Jabari had big shoes to fill, but oh my goodness, I don't think anyone knew how enormous his heart is. So when you say action, I mean, I don't know what he's going to do. He doesn't know what I'm going to do. And, you know, I used to be a teacher. I was a professor for over 10 years. And what I've learned is that like when you're young like that, you don't even have like tricks yet. You only have truth. And so that is what he did every day on set and even off camera. He is a natural leader and he's just silly and fun, which we all are on this show. You know, it's so dramatic, but we actually have so much joy off set too. But I mean, I can't say enough kind things about him, but I think in general, what makes this show so great is that somehow, you know, Vicki Thomas, the casting director, just hit the jackpot in picking people. You know, to be an actor is not to pretend, it's to reveal parts of yourself constantly. It's a constant, you know, opening yourself up to people, showing more vulnerability, showing the thing that everyone else hides. And everyone in this show does a great job of trying to reveal parts of themselves that have been hidden.
Mm. Yeah, that's very true. And another actor I wanted to just mention that you get to work with is Michael Ealy, who plays the art gallery owner. I actually saw a headline about him in this show that describes him as a handsome troublemaker, which I thought was pretty accurate because there's like this charge between his character and with Viv that feels like it's going to lead to something, but doesn't really, you know. But what were your thoughts just on that storyline as you're reading the scripts and trying to figure out like where's this all heading? What were your thoughts on that?
You know, I think you know, it might sound woo-woo, but I think the universe sends you the type of bait you need to lead you into the direction that your life force really wants you to go in. And, you know, I think it's delicious that the person who sees her true artistry, you know, who sees her heart is like this beautiful man. And I think the two together makes it, isn't it funny how anybody can tell you, wow, you're so good at what you do. But if the right package on the right day tells you, you really have to stand to attention. And every time he acknowledges how creative, how artistic she is, how talented she is. She even says at one point, she's like, why are you trying to gas me up? Like, is this sexual? And then at some point you realize like, no, he actually talks art. He is art. And she gets a connection from him she hasn't gotten from anyone in over 15 years, including her own husband. And I think he did a fantastic job of sort of doing the balancing act of, does he like me or is it my art he's enamored with? And the truth is, when you love someone's art, their voice, their singing, their acting, something about it is so much more intimate than just if it's just your friend and you like someone. When you like what someone does for a living, it can't help but feel sexual. It's like the sexual transmutation, even if you don't mean it. Because, I used to have a teacher who said, there's always the girl who sleeps with all the drummers until she learns how to drum. And then she's not interested in them anymore. And I feel like that's what this is. He's not an artist, but he's a curator of artists.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that makes sense, the intimacy, because it's like it is an expression of herself that he's so interested in. So
yeah, and he's tapping into it and trying to talk deeper into it. No one else is having these kind of
no one else is engaging with her on that level. Right.
Exactly.
Well, another element that I wanted to talk about that I found very compelling is just her relationship with her sister, Vi. And there's some real tension there that we see in that 8th episode, especially where they're really just, reopening these old wounds. And I feel like for so much of the show, like she's so put together, but in this episode, it's like everything's sort of coming out. Can you just talk about that storyline and how her sister coming back into her life really kind of almost destabilizes her in a way?
Yeah, I love that storyline because no one but your family knows every button to push. Like only your family can make a trigger come back like this. But also something about her and that actress in general is a mirror to Vivian of who she really is, where she really came from. And she also has to deal with the fact that, you know, many artists, you know, Vivian has an idea about herself, which is, I made who I am. But really, her mother and her sister gave her the space to go be an artist. They gave her the space, the time, and the money to do so. Even when her mother was dying, they still gave her the space to live her life, and other people sacrificed. And somehow that was a blind spot to her. And that's why she hadn't seen Will in over 10 years either. So to see this woman, I think, is just a constant reminder of how she's not so perfect, even though she's everyone else's wise friend. You know, I like to call it, like, she does these Vivian things where she wants to Viv people. She wants to be like the truth. She's like Maya Angelou. And then her sister shows up and you realize, no, she's a little girl who has a lot to learn. And actually, she only has the space she has now in her life is because of her husband now. So really, she didn't do anything on her own. She did it because of a whole bunch of other people. And her sister comes for her. And for that little girl in her, she thinks it's all just because she hates her. And it's like, no, can you just acknowledge somebody? I love that episode. I think it's a beautiful moment of two sisters trying to finally see each other, but you get so confused. And none of that stuff comes out until you're 40. These are all true stories.
Yeah. Well, just to maybe bring it full circle in the last few minutes here, I did also want to just touch on episode 9, where you're working with Daphne Maxwell Reid and also Vernee Watson Johnson, both from the original show, sort of bringing it full circle. Can you talk about just that day of shooting, what that felt like?
Yeah, it was a very momentous day.
Yeah.
It felt electric. Anybody and everybody who could come to set came to set that day, and we were shooting on location. So imagine actors who don't have to work came to work that day just to watch, like any of the executives, anyone who could come. And it was just one of those, like, I just wish I could run to the little girl in me and say, hey, one day that woman on this screen, you're going to go through the looking glass and go act with her. And let me tell you, I mean, Daphne Maxwell and Vernee, they were everything that you would hope it would be if you met someone of that level of fame, of someone who's like in your consciousness like that. Like, she was so giving. Like, she told me, she's like, listen, you are Viv 3.0. She's like, she's like, I want you to take up all this space and be Viv 3.0. And I just thought, how generous of a spirit. And what's so amazing to me is that neither one of them hold onto the mantle of these titles of like, no, these are my characters. They're like, Cassie, they said it was, you know, lightning in a bottle. We didn't know what we had. And so she thinks, and she's like, now she still thinks it's crazy that it's still living on. So I love that she thinks that, you know, not even thinks, but she knows that I'm just a part of her legacy. And I feel so honored. That's really what it comes down to. I'm just very honored.
Wow. I mean, if nothing else, then you at least have her blessing there. That's kind of beautiful.
Right, exactly.
Well, for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Emmy predictions. Thank you so much, Cassandra, for your time.
Listen, thank you for this space and time. Thank you so much.